Welcome, everybody. It is great to see you all for the Winter 2022 Showcase. Still the best impact event in London, the UK, and possibly the world. Can I hear it for that? All right. We have a lot of treats in store for you tonight. In particular, we have some special guests with us. We have James Wright, the managing director for Jude's Ice Cream. I know a big favorite for a lot of people in the crowd, one of my favorite ice creams. And we also have Keren Pybus, the CEO of Ethical Apparel Africa. And they are transforming the way that textile is being manufactured in Africa. And given that this is our 10th showcase for our 10th cohort, we're also going to get an update from one of the businesses on our first cohort, New Ground Coffee, and what they've been up to over the last few years since coming off the program. But of course, the stars of this event are the founders of the 4 startups in our 10th cohort. So can I get a round of applause there? We are currently halfway through the program. It's a 6-month program. We're just finishing week 12. And they have done amazing work working on their businesses and their incredible impact. And we're so excited that you're going to get to meet them shortly. My name is Gordon Eichhorst. I'm one of the co-founders at Impact Central, along with Sarah Louise Martin and Ian Smart. I can't see Ian and SL over there. And as I was mentioning, this is our 10th showcase event. And for that, we have put together a very special brochure for you tonight. So I think we have a slide with a QR code. And so if you can take out your phones, this is our brochure. It has a lot of information about our speakers, about the businesses, and also some information about Impact Central. So please take that, and you can take that home with you and read it and learn more about everybody that you're going to hear from tonight. So if this is your first time at a showcase, you won't know, but we actually do a lot of audience participation. There's always kind of a mixed kind of noise when that comes up. And tonight, what I was saying, in other words, it's our 10th showcase. We think that's a big milestone. A lot has changed in the 4 years since we ran our first showcase. And we know that a lot of people come, and part of the reason we're doing this is we have a lot of concern about the social and environmental challenges that we're facing globally. But let's face it, we know that those didn't happen overnight. Those were choices that we made over 10, 15, and even 20 years that we're kind of dealing with now. And a lot of us would say, well, could we make those choices differently if we had them to do over again? What would we do differently this time? So the first thing we're going to have everybody do tonight, we're going to do a little exercise in this. I'm going to wipe the slate clean for everybody. And I want you to turn to your neighbor. You can do it in groups of 2 or 3. And I want you to ask each other the following question. Knowing what I know about myself, about yourself, and about the state of the world, if you could start over again, what is the job or the career that you would choose to do now and for the rest of your life, and why? So turn to each other. Once again, the job, knowing what you know now about yourself and the world. So we're going to take a couple minutes. I can see we're getting some good conversation on this one. All right. Well, let's go around the room, and who wants to raise their hand and tell me what did you come up with? Let's hear some changes that people would make. Anybody? What would somebody else do differently if they had that change to make? Come on, I know there's a lot of talking going on. I'm going to have to start calling on people. You don't want me to do that unless I see some hands going up. All right. Well, I'm going to have to start calling on people. What did you guys think? Economics. So you would do something differently or in economics instead of what you're doing now? Okay, that's great. Thank you. How about someone in this group? Steve Cockrum, what would you do now? Yeah. You do what you're doing now. Changing people. I love that. How about in this group? Anybody want to tell us what would you do differently if you had that opportunity again? Oh, great. We definitely need some better children's programming. So now, from all the conversation that was going on, I can tell there were a lot of ideas that were flying around. And I want you to hold on to those, because tonight, when you listen to some of the founders, maybe they'll have an opportunity for you where you might be able to make that change. And without any further ado, I want to now introduce our first speaker of the evening, and one of our founders. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Alessandra of Women in Travel.
Hello, good evening, welcome everyone. My name is Alessandra Alonso and I'm the founder of social enterprise Women in Travel. Now, the story of Women in Travel begins with a red jacket. Back in the 1990s, I was working in travel and tourism organizations. I was a senior leader, and I always, or very often, found myself being the only woman in the room. As such, my male colleagues and clients often defaulted to asking me for tea making and note taking. I felt slightly invisible. Until one day, a colleague said to me, "Why don't you try wearing a red jacket?" Why not? I did, and the result was I felt confident, I felt full of energy and leadership, and it worked. I became visible. That day, I learned an important lesson about mentoring and about the importance of small acts of allyship and how they can change your life for good. Now, fast forward 20 years. The travel and tourism industry is populated by women, often in lower-level jobs and poorer pay. When the pandemic struck, the industry was decimated, and women left the sector in droves. However, in its aftermath, the industry is now facing a massive talent crisis. And in fact, between 11 and 18% of all positions across aviation, leisure, accommodation, in travel have been vacant in 2022. They remain unfulfilled in the UK, but the story is very similar across the EU. So that's where Women in Travel comes in. We connect underserved, diverse female talent to employers in the travel and tourism sector. And we provide wraparound care that enables employers to feel confident about recruiting this talent and enables women to feel confident about breaking into the marketplace. Not only do we provide highly motivated, engaged, brilliant talent, but we also provide employers with a way to strengthen their brand. This is because of our purpose and values. And as you know, these are things that matter the most to the younger generation when it comes to attracting and retaining their talent. Now, we really change women's life in the process. How? By providing economic empowerment, by providing mentoring and confidence and motivation, and by creating an environment in which, supportive environment, in fact, in which they can thrive and develop skills for the future. Take, for example, Stefanit, the Ethiopian lady on the left of the slide. She was an Ethiopian refugee who escaped an abusive relationship when we first met her. And she was trained as a tour guide and now provides tours of Shepherd's Bush Market in West London through the eyes of the Ethiopian community. They've been featured in the Financial Times and in the Evening Standard, amongst others. You should try them too. The lady on the right is Laura, a Romanian national who came to us at an all-time low in her confidence. And yet, after 6 months, she had accepted a job as a receptionist in a central London hotel, and according to the CEO, she was outperforming all her colleagues. So, these women are thriving. They are supporting their kids, their families, and they are developing amazing transferable skills that are good for travel and tourism and beyond. Between 2020 and 2021, Women in Travel delivered 1,200 hours of support to over 150 women. We also helped 30 find jobs in travel and tourism, and another 50 indirectly move into jobs in other sectors. However, we are far more ambitious, and we want to help hundreds and thousands of women who in the UK alone could be the next travel and tourism workforce. If we scale up, then we can create not only brilliant talent for travel and tourism, but actually for many other sectors too, because those skills are transferable. So, can we do this alone? No. And as you can see, I still love to wear red, because red reminds me of allyship. And so tonight, if you are interested or engaged in recruitment, if you love to travel and are passionate about tourism, or if you are interested in women's causes, then please join us on this journey and help us change the lives of thousands of women and make the industry more diverse and more inclusive. Thank you.
Well now, good evening. Good evening, right, thank you. So I know a whole bunch of you out here, but I don't know everybody yet. So I'm Ian, the short guy who was sitting on the end there, occasionally mistaken even by my own daughter for Stanley Tucci. It used to be Moby, if anybody remembers Moby, but yeah, Pablo, you remember Moby? Yeah, cool. So it's got a bit colder recently, hasn't it? Got a little bit colder. So what better on a chilly December evening than some ice cream? Yeah, well, actually, maybe not ice cream, but maybe a little version of ice cream that's just coming into the room now. And our great team are going to be sharing this around the room. Yeah, we're very, very excited to invite you to taste. And some ice cream-based product is coming up. And at this moment, I should probably invite to the stage both Sarah Louise and James Wright of Jude's Ice Cream. So why don't you come to the stage? Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. You're a bit of a tough crowd this evening. I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest. So James and I are going to work through a few quick-fire questions to hopefully get you a bit more warmed up.
Can I also just say, I'm sorry it's not real ice cream, it's milkshakes. And also, Gordon, you said that one of your favourite ice creams was Jude's. Yeah, that's it, that's good. Good. Sorry, it was bugging me.
So we're going to learn the story of Jude's Ice Cream this evening. Before we get into that, I think it would be more interesting to learn a little bit more about you. You ready?
Great.
Okay, so what's been your best adventure so far?
I think it has to be Jude's.
Jude's, okay,
Jude's,
cool,
yeah.
That was easy. If you could choose to do anything for one day, what would it be?
It would be hang out with my family. I've got 4 children, aged 4 to 10, and it's lots of fun.
Wow. What's your favourite Jude's ice cream flavour?
Difficult question. So now we've just launched a triple chocolate ice cream stick, and it's amazing.
Brilliant. Loving hearing those cans opening. That's amazing. Okay, final question. Do you have a favourite child?
No.
Okay, correct answer. Well done. Can you give us the skinny on Jude's? So Jude's recently this year actually celebrated its 20th anniversary. Tell us a little bit how the company got started and the trajectory so far.
Yeah, thanks, SL. So we started 20 years ago, and I think the first thing to say is what we do is we make unbelievably delicious ice cream.
True.
And I hope you've all tried it, and if not, please do. We've won over 100 Great Taste Awards. You know, that's what we do, but why we do what we do is so much more important. So we are a purpose-driven business. So we passionately believe that businesses can and should be forces for good, that businesses are a vehicle for change. And we're a certified B Corp, and I think the way we describe it is our purpose is to bring life to people and planet. And for people, the most important thing for us at Jude's is that everyone feels valued, appreciated, and enjoys coming to work. If we can get that right, that is our number one. And the way we describe that and talk about that internally is the idea of servant leadership. So it's things like the characteristics that we want to foster and encourage and champion are things like being forgiving, being kind, being truthful.
Love to hear it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's the most important thing at Jude's, the people side. And then the other side on the planet and what we actually do in the products.
We're going to get into that a wee bit later. Yeah, cool. So as you have said, Jude's has won over 100 Great Taste Awards. There's got to be something in how it's made. Obviously, you can't give us a secret recipe, but tell us a little bit about what makes it a bit different. And also maybe more importantly, why did it get going in the first place? Because I think the founder origin story is quite interesting for people.
Yeah, so 20 years ago, Jude's husband retired, and he lived on an old dairy farm just outside Winchester. And he thought he wanted to do something. He thought cheese or ice cream. And he thought ice cream sounded a bit more fun. So he brought a very small ice cream machine, started tinker away in a barn, and then walked across the field to the local pub, knocked on the door and said, "What do you think of this?" And that's how we started. So we started supplying little pubs, then came up here to London, and then gradually have grown from there.
And where can anyone find you if they haven't already known that you exist? Where can we buy Jude's?
So you can buy us in most supermarkets. You can buy us in, or if you're going to pubs, hotels, restaurants. But if Tesco, Sainsbury, Ocado, Waitrose.
And I think it's really easy. You're 20 years into your story. It's really easy to talk about success, and you've done really well over a really sustained long period of time, and you've done things quite differently, which starting out 20 years ago was probably quite a statement to make. For founders that we've known and loved, and we've worked with nearly 60 of them now over the course of the past almost 5 years, it's not always plain sailing. And so it's easy to romanticize business as a force for good and a force of nature, which of course it is. But there are also tricky times as well. So are you willing to share what any of those have been and maybe what you've learned as a consequence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from our experience, business is up and down the whole time. But for us, what's been most important is the idea that we are purpose-driven, that we're here to bring life to people and planet. And so for us, recently, COVID, like for everyone, was a really hard time. We lost half the business overnight. Total uncertainty. And I think what sort of gets us through that and got us through it was we're very clear on the vision of where we want to go. That purpose, we know why we're doing what we're doing. And then working collaboratively with an amazing team, which goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. It's all about people. Yeah. And that gives the agility and the ability to respond to situations, and that helps you when it's tough and when it's really great. So I think always reminding ourselves why you're doing what you're doing, persevering, keeping on going.
And through that particularly tricky time during COVID, were there any opportunities that came out of that were maybe a little unexpected?
Yeah, well, I think for us, one one really amazing part of COVID was that's when we decided to reduce our carbon intensity by 43%. So I think it ties into our purpose. So for us, it was peak uncertainty. And I think we've always said that we always want the courage to make the difficult decisions when they matter most. And we'd started a project about 3 years ago of really trying to understand the environment and sustainability. And we've always been a sustainable business, but really understand it more. And we realized that we needed to do something more meaningful immediately. And so in the middle of COVID, when there was peak uncertainty, we committed to a whole load of things, which for us at the time was, it was a big deal.
Talk us through that whole load of things. What does that mean?
So we've committed to reducing carbon intensity by 43%. So essentially, we're trying to totally rethink what good ice cream looks like. We're trying to make it much more sustainable. So last year alone, we reduced our carbon intensity by 20%, so half our target for 2030. And we've done that by, essentially, we're big believers in incremental change. Lots of little things in isolation, you add them up and makes a big change. And for us, for making great ice cream, everything is all about the details. Lots of little things, you add them together, it makes a difference. So we've got this target. Our main goal is reducing carbon intensity, but we also offsets 110% of our scopes 1 to 3 emissions. So that's basically all your emissions from the farm essentially to the shelf. So absolutely everything. And there are other things we do as well. But the whole idea for us.
What has had to change in the process of making the ice cream to allow that to happen?
So we are totally rethinking what good ice cream looks like, and a big one for us is plant-based ice cream.
Okay.
So we're really trying to give consumers and everyone the choice of a whole new range of ice cream. And the reason we want to introduce plant-based ice cream is that our plant-based ice cream is about 40% less carbon than our dairy ice cream and uses almost 80% less land. So those stats are amazing. So if more people can try, and there's some actually plant-based chocolate milkshake here, but we're trying to produce unbelievably high-quality plant-based products that taste delicious, but at the same time, going back to our purpose, they bring life in terms of they're really good for the planet and they help decarbonize.
So thank you so much. That's been really helpful to understand. We really love your product, and obviously you have expanded quite a lot in the past few years in a lot more supermarkets and also now in Europe. What's been the most interesting product category for you? You were talking about the sticks earlier and plant-based, and give us a bit more detail on that.
I think for me, plant-based is the most exciting.
Yeah.
But within that, we're launching into sticks, which is super exciting. We're talking about ice cream for dogs, which we now do.
Okay.
So if anyone has any dogs, we do ice cream for dogs.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It's super good. You've got to try it. You've got to try it. It tastes good.
I think I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's flying off the shelf.
Okay, cool. Dogs actually like ice cream.
They love it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So, final question. Which Jude's flavour should I add to my Christmas dessert bar?
I think if you can find it, brandy butter.
Oh.
You should probably do that.
Okay.
But if not, try our plant-based vanilla.
Okay, I will. So you know where to find Jude's in your local supermarket. And thank you so much, James, for being here with us this evening. Back on the stage. I would just love to welcome to the stage Civil Society Consulting. So if you can give a massive round of applause to Francesca and Natasha.
Hello everyone. Yeah, I'm Natasha and this is Francesca. Look around you in society and communities. Would you say that things are working? We feel that our top-down system for delivering public services and supporting people and communities needs to change. If you're not represented at the top, your needs are unlikely to be being met. As funding cuts and as the problems that we're facing get ever more complex, we're needing new approaches. As a wise man once said, We can't solve problems using the same thinking that we used when we created them. There's been a reckoning, and I think we all know that we need to do things differently. More and more, we're looking back to nature, back to basics, back to local. Nature tells us that we can regenerate from the bottom up, and we believe that civil society organisations are the silver bullet in a new bottom-up approach to supporting people and communities. So first off, what is civil society? Civil society is any person, community, or organisation working outside of the government to solve some of the biggest problems that we're facing, and generally trying to do some good. In many cases, a civil society organisation starts because somebody in a community identifies an unfulfilled need, a gap in the market, and starts answering that need. Take Kadra, for example, a Somali woman from West London, this lovely, legendary woman in the red, also in red. She wanted to do something about the fact that her community are socially and economically excluded. She started a charity called Macwo to support them. We see time and time again through our work that organisations like Macwo fill the gaps in public services. Whether they're being supported and resourced or not, they're the ones picking up the slack. They reach those currently let down by the system. So organisations like Macwo are so brilliant because they're agile, they're sincerely motivated and trusted by their communities and extremely knowledgeable of them as well. So if we want health, equality and cohesion, we need to leverage all the potential that these type of organisations have. Not doing so is an inefficiency. So how can we leverage civil society? What do organisations like Macwo, people like Kadra need? Well, definitely they need funding, but having been under-resourced and overworked for far too long, they also need capacity and innovation. And that's where we and our team come in. In our experience, organisations like Macwo do not need to be told what to do. They simply need external support to get key activities and projects off the ground and over the line from a specialist who gets it and who shares their passion, but of course, which is affordable as well.
So, what did we do for Macwo? We supported them to secure funding from 2 local authorities by evidencing their amazing impact. And now they're running a prison project and a project about mental health, which is no small feat. Macwo are an amazing example of the type of organisation we work with, but as a marginalised community, they achieve what they achieve against the odds. If we want civil society to be effective, it needs to be more representative of the communities that need it most. And that's why we started our flagship initiative, Steps to Sustainability. We provide free support to organisations led by and for marginalised communities, so more people can be supported by more organisations like Macwo. Steps to Sustainability is commissioned by funders and corporates that want to make a difference in the communities around them. And so far, we've worked with over 100 organisations across the UK, across London, the North East, the North West, and the Midlands. And collectively, we've raised over £800,000 to keep these organisations going. We're also commissioned by organisations at the top to do research. Funders, housing associations, think tanks, and philanthropists. These organisations want to do a better job of working with communities and supporting civil society, and we help them to do this. We work with clients according to their availability. Working with clients on more commercial terms, these bigger clients working on more commercial terms means that we still get to work with more under-resourced organisations that need our support. More and more, governments are starting to understand that civil society can do things that public services are struggling to achieve. And that's where you come in. By supporting civil society, you can make a real difference. You're not just putting money you're not just throwing money at a problem, you're putting money into a solution. And we'd like your help to scale our initiatives and grow our organisation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fran and Sasha. The businesses that are on Impact Central are UK corporations or UK companies. But we deal with problems that are global because, frankly, a lot of our problems have become global. And certainly, one part of the world that needs our help the most is Africa. And that's probably because our relationship in the West with Africa has not been exemplary for most of history. We've treated it as a very exploitative opportunity, extracting resources and not dealing well with the people in Africa. Now, it's important, obviously, that state-sanctioned slavery is no longer available or no longer sanctioned, but there's a huge difference between not being abusive and actually being supportive. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what do we need to do for our neighbors in Africa, and what can we do to help them flourish, not just survive? And I'm really happy that tonight we have someone with us, and she's going to talk about what she's doing, making a real difference in Africa and changing the lives of people directly. Let me just read here. Keren Pybus is the CEO and co-founder of Ethical Apparel Africa. She brings over 20 years of experience in sourcing, merchandising, and retail operations. Her passion for ethical manufacturing drove her to start the business with her co-founder Paloma and to develop a model that proves that living wages and worker empowerment are not mutually exclusive with cost-competitive product and profit. So I just want to reiterate that. This is not an NGO. This is actually a profitable business that is on the ground making real impact and changing people's lives. Keren has worked all over the world, including living in Bangladesh for 3 years, setting up and running the Georgia sourcing office, and she has worked with both large retailers such as Walmart, UK, and South Africa, and with small-scale artisan suppliers. Please join me in welcoming Keren Pybus to the stage. Thank you so much for being with us, Keren.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I feel like I can't talk to the people around there. Hold on.
Just going to move a little.
Just going to angle myself slightly better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start with, you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved in global supply chains and perhaps what we need to know about global supply chains.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me, first of all. I have been in the fashion industry since I went to uni and studied fashion. And then I worked for a long time I was never going to be a buyer. I'm terrible at drawing or design stuff. So I was always on the merchandising sourcing part. And when I moved to Bangladesh, I was really, really challenged by the fact that the money was just all staying either in the worker's pocket or in the retailer's pocket, wasn't getting down to the workers. And yet there was so much opportunity to use the industry as a force for good from a job creation point of view, to create worthwhile, sustainable jobs. And so I'm a strong Christian. I had some time in Bangladesh, and then I moved to South Africa when I had an opportunity to work for Asda in South Africa. And but I got a very clear word from God to say, if you want to walk on the water, you've got to get out of the boat. And basically, like, put your money where your mouth is if you really want to do this. So I procrastinated, looked for something that was really scary, couldn't find anything. I was 40, single, living in Bangladesh. You know, I couldn't think of anywhere that was difficult to live in that sense. And then one day I got made redundant. And so for about half an hour, I got a bit upset. And then I was like, oh, okay, God, you wouldn't wait for me to get out the boat, so you pushed me instead. And so I spent the next 6 months looking around Africa as I saw this incredible opportunity to do something different with the industry from a different base. So rather than trying to change an industry in so many of these different countries that had been so inherently burnt by a lot of the things that had happened. Mm-hmm. And so we found an opportunity to do that in an emerging industry in Africa and set out to develop a model that was going to change the way that manufacturing was done at large scale. I definitely didn't want to do it at small scale, kind of high-end luxury. I wanted to do it at mass scale.
So that sounds like the founding of Ethical Apparel Africa. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what that structure is and also about your co-founder.
Yeah, so I've got the textile background, and Paloma, my co-founder, was, she's very, very bright. She's ex-Yale, she's American. Yeah, they're quite bright too, apparently. She brings all the process and that side of things to the business. And so we run it together as a dual leadership. And we started by just doing, trying to help factories to be able to manufacture at international standards from a compliance point of view and quality point of view. But without orders, there was nothing that you could do through these factories. So we started getting a lot of orders in, some that I would never, ever go back and do again, like trying to sell fashion into Australia from Ghana, just never going to work. And then have developed a model over time that basically says, if you can achieve operational excellence in what you're doing, lowest amount of waste, best usage of your resources that you've got, then you can be profitable in terms of you can attract orders. So you can be cost competitive. If you can be cost competitive, you can attract the international export orders that Ghana needs because there's no retail industry there, biggest importer of secondhand clothing in the world, etc. But then what do you do with those export order profits? Well, actually then if you reinvest those back into your workers, you drive worker satisfaction, you create the best place to work, you go towards living wages, you create something that's really fantastic. That worker satisfaction goes up, which, what a surprise, absenteeism goes down, your labour turnover goes down, so what happens then? Your operational excellence goes back up again, and you continue to be profitable through that. But the key thing for us is reinvesting that into the people.
Yeah, I know when we were speaking earlier, I found it really interesting. You talked about like different levels of where factories are. So maybe for our benefit, you could just walk us through. So what is a basic factory like in an emerging market?
So I would categorize factories kind of in sort of 3 levels now, I guess. There are still a lot of factories out there that are at risk of things like Rana Plaza happening to them. There are some really terrible things still happening out there in the industry. Me personally, I would never buy from a market stall or a wholesaler or somewhere you cannot trace where those goods have come from at all. But there's been a lot of really good stuff that's happened in the industry as a result of some terrible tragedies. And so you've got kind of a second tier of factories now, which are what I call the base compliance. So all the big players now, whether you're Primark, whether you're H&M, whether you're Zara, you're M&S, or any of those, will do baseline compliance in their factories. No forced labour, no child labour, freedom of association, making sure everybody's paid the minimum wage, all the basics that you need to function a business in a good way to protect your workers. But for us, that's not enough. We want to go beyond that point. We want to go to that next level. And so the third tier of factories for me are the ones that are really putting workers at the center of what we do. And so in some level, that's things like profit sharing, but at a basic level, that could be not just providing them water to drink during the day, but providing them tankards that they can fill their water buckets from to be able to take home to their family at the end of the day. As a really simple example, healthcare, not just about having a nurse on site, but actually for breast cancer, we did awareness program, and then we screened everybody that wanted to be screened in the factory. And actually out of 350 workers that were in that day, we had found 5 women with issues, and we're now supporting them through that next process.
And I guess one question would be, there must be people in Ghana that would try to do a similar type of factory. Why is it so hard for them to create this themselves?
So we have partner factories that we work with that we don't own, and then there's one factory that we have a majority stake in that we do own, which we use as a learning lab and a model factory for other factories to work with. We're non-competitive in that sense in our approach. But for the African factory owners, one of their biggest challenges is access to finance. So if you try and borrow money to expand your business as an African owner, unless you've got some overseas connections or you happen to find a really great investor that's willing to come, you're going to pay 18% interest, for example, in debt financing. As a British registered business with a Ghanaian branch office, and all of our investors are American, we can access that finance much easier, therefore we can expand quicker.
So what are the plans now? What does the future look like for Ethical Apparel Africa?
Do you know, I was on talking to an investor today, and this is a top tip question for you guys to be thinking about for your future. And he said to me, okay, nothing can grow that fast. If you think you can get to your 20-year goal, nobody gets to their 20-year goal. Everything changes as you go along. What's your base camp goal, but then what is your Everest goal? And how are you doing firstly against your base camp goal? And then really, what is Everest? And he really pushed us on the kind of Everest point. So for us, we are going to export about $4 million worth of goods this year. We want to be at 20 million by 2025 and 100 million by 2030. That will in turn grow to, we've created about 1,000 jobs there so far. We will be aiming to create between 10 and 20,000 jobs by 2030. And it's all about the job creation for us.
And I guess one of the kind of perceptions that people have of emerging markets is that you can't get, you only have low-skilled labor. How are you able to upskill the workforce in order to take on orders in kind of more complex areas?
So every job within our factory has a career ladder. So whether you're the cleaner, whether you're the cutting in charge person, whether you're the HR manager, every single job has a career ladder and a training program that can go with it. So everybody knows that if they want to progress, because not everybody does, then there's a route into which they do it. Everybody then has a personal development plan and a way to do that. And we have a balance of expats working. So I've got 11 different nationalities on my team, speaking 20 different languages, I think, that work within the factories and within the EAA team in Accra and Ghana that do that training. And that can be as simple as we did a 1-hour training session just on buttons last week. It's amazing how complex buttons can be, and if you get the wrong one, it can really ruin something. So, like, really trying to get into the nuts and bolts of things.
And so where do you see are kind of the biggest challenges, and how do you get other kind of brands, larger brands, to take note? Are they coming along, or what do you have to do to get them to change?
So we have a nice little sweet spot that's helping us a little bit, which is called the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is a free trade agreement between Africa and the US, which is why we export 99% of our goods to the US, because basically that means that the Americans don't pay duty on goods that I send from Ghana, whereas they pay about 16 to 30% duty on something that's coming from Bangladesh or Cambodia. That gives me the ability to have a lower efficiency factory to start with as we grow, because it gives me the cost buffer to be able to deal with those things. It also gives us the buffer to be able to help other factories and people to invest in those things. Surprisingly, that's the biggest win for the brands that we're dealing with, not the fact that we're ethical. But what we try and do is really push our ethical and sustainable agenda. And you're starting to see it change, and people not just using it because it could be a good marketing tool, but because it's actually the right thing to do. So we've just launched a range with a skiwear brand in the States where every garment will have a tag on it with EAA, Ethical Apparel Africa, on it, and a QR code that shows who made those garments. And they are probably the second biggest skiwear brand in the US. So this is not like a small company.
That's amazing. So I know this is a really active audience. They like to get involved. What can a UK consumer do to help you in what you're trying to do in Africa?
That's really interesting because there's nothing you can buy here that I'm making. I think just as consumers, and I know people say this a lot in terms of being aware of what you're purchasing, where you're purchasing it from, and following us, particularly on LinkedIn and seeing what you're doing, talking about it. And if you do come across people that are interested, we've done a Series A, we've done a seed investment round, we've closed the Series A investment round, we'll be doing a Series B investment round in 2023 to hopefully put up another 1 to 2 factories. So, often you find yourself in random conversations with people that you didn't think you could, remember who we are, look us up, and come enjoy the ride.
Well, Keren, thank you so much for telling us what you're doing in Africa. I for one, am glad that, God kicked you out of the boat.
Thank you.
So thank you. Give me a round of applause. All right, we have our next founder And that is Rue from Herdware.
Hi, I'm Rue, and I adore luxury knitwear. And I'm sure there are some of you in the room who also do. But have you ever looked at the label? Well, I did, and it precipitated a journey of woolly discovery. First, there's the wool. The vast majority of wool for knitwear comes from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and China, literally halfway around the world. Then the additives and processes. Petrochemicals like polyamide are added, and the fleece is stripped, ready for dyeing, using, guess what, more petrochemicals. Then there's the supply chain. From fleece to knit, there are multiple different processes, all of which happen in different countries across an 18,000-mile supply chain. But none of this is on the label, is it? Fashion is the second biggest contributor to climate change after fossil fuels, and the lack of transparency is systemic. Who knows how those sheep were treated? Who knows how much the farmers were paid for those fleeces? And how about the conditions of the factories where the scouring, carding, combing, knitting, and finishing took place? Certainly not you, the consumer who paid their hard-earned money for that jumper and inadvertently upheld a system that degrades landscapes, abuses animals, and exploits factory workers. And all of this to look good? I didn't want the planet to pay the price for me to look good. So when I heard the bemusing fact that farmers in the UK were getting paid less for their fleeces than the cost of shearing them, and so burying or burning this precious natural resource, I knew I had to know more. So I travelled to the north of England, from Lancashire to Northumberland. I went to farms, I met farmers, I climbed fell and dale, and I learnt a lot about sheep. It was during this time that I met the Romeo of ovine law, the blue-faced Leicester. With a handsome profile, ears like a rabbit, and an exceptionally fine fleece. His fleece is actually rivaled to merino. Now, I know knitwear, and I know that it has to be soft. Itchiness just will not do. If you cannot wear it next to your skin, then frankly, it should have been used for carpets. Now, the blue-faced Leicester fleece is not just fine, it is also long, which means less ends, which means less itchiness. It seemed like my vision of a luxury homegrown knitwear brand might just be possible. By this time, I was hooked on this story and I had to know more. This time, my travels took me to the global home of wool production, Yorkshire. Where once there were hundreds of factories, there are now just a handful. But they process fleece at such a scale that hundreds of tons per week passes through these facilities for carpets, upholstery, and knitwear. There is nowhere else in the entire world where all these facilities exist in one region. So not thousands of miles of supply chain, but less than 300. Herdware is an ecosystem. We have taken something old and made it new. We make knitwear, we make yarn, and we make knitting wool and kits, all from 100% pedigree blue-faced Leicester that we source directly from farmers in the northern uplands and process within a 150-mile radius of the farms, completely naturally, using no synthetic chemicals, just organic detergents, plant dyes, and water. Herd is a new luxury. It is classic without the carbon emissions, beautiful without greenwashing. Herd is feeling good without the guilt. It is an opportunity to connect to the landscape, the soil, clothes and people, animals and people that make our clothes. Because with luxury and craftsmanship comes longevity. Buy, wear, love a herd knit, and it will outlive you. And even then, because it is made of 100% compostable materials, its richness will return to the soil. And those who know have already been paying attention. We've been worn by Kate Moss and Helena Bonham Carter, and we've already been featured in Vogue. But the good fight needs all the help it can get. And you are welcome to join our herd of wool warriors, saving the planet one knit at a time. After all, what do you want your jumper label to say? Thank you.
There we go. So yeah, Rue, I've got a herd jumper on my Christmas list for sure. Christmas lists. It's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas. Who's feeling Christmassy? It's 1st of December. Not many yet. One or two. Okay, one or two. So I've already mentioned my daughter, who's somewhere, the elder daughter. Where is she? Give us a wave. Where is she? Oh, she's at the back there. So Millie's at the back, sort of shirking away at the back. So we have a tough time, don't we, in December? Because before we can get to Christmas, we've got her sister and her mum's birthdays to think of. So we can't be thinking of Christmas gifts yet. But you should not delay. You should not delay. I don't know precisely how many shopping days there are before Christmas. But if you leave it until after the World Cup final, there'll only be 6, right? So don't leave it that long.
Do not do that.
Do not
That'll
leave
be
it
a
that long.
disaster.
So, as if by magic, Santa Sarah Louise has joined me on the stage. There you are, Santa Sarah Louise in your Santa hat.
So what we've done is we have compiled an ethical gift guide. So all the gifts featured on the gift guide are actually founders that have been through our program. And we have a variety of gifts for a variety of price points. You've got some lovely stocking fillers there. So you've got shampoo bars. If you can see, my glorious hair has been washed today with Kind 2 shampoo bar. And it's excellent because everybody knows shampoo is really important for day 2. What does your hair look like on day 2? So it's fantastic. If you'd like some great shampoo without using plastic bottle, go for that. We've got some beanies. We've got some lovely face serum. If there are any little newborn babies in your life, there's some lovely muslin blankets. Some kombucha. If you want to go for an non-alcoholic alternative over Christmas, then add that to your bar. Some children's clothing. We've got the herd wear there. We've got a lovely pop-on, some jewellery, some lovely underwear. Very comfortable. Scalp scrub, amazing Newground coffee. You'll be hearing a little bit more about Newground very shortly. We've got, if you are obviously on a more serious note, it is a really tricky time for so many people with the cost of living crisis. So if you would like to donate to a local food bank, you can do that through Banquet. Banquet were one of our first, one of the startups on one of our early programs. You can do that as well. And you can send some letterbox brownies for friends that you might not be able to see over the festive period through Luminary Bakery, and then some wonderful ethical fashion items as well. So we'll send that out to you in an email probably over the next couple of days.
Perfect. Lots of great ideas on there. And, as if by magic, you were talking about shampoo bars.
I was.
I think we ought to hear about shampoo bars. Don't you, ladies and gentlemen? Should we hear about shampoo bars? Perfect. Right. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Sue Campbell of Kind 2. Sue.
Hands up, who has a bottle of shampoo in their bathroom? Hello. My name is Sue Campbell. I'm the founder of Kind 2, and tonight I want to change the way you think about shampoo. Every year in the UK, we go through 500 million single-use plastic bottles of shampoo and conditioner. And in your lifetime, you're likely to use about 500. This photograph I took on a beach in Hong Kong, after a beach cleanup. We had 90 full bin bags, and I left feeling absolutely defeated. This is literally one small beach on one small island. And so the futility of our efforts really got me thinking that something absolutely has to change, and what can I personally do to make a difference? You already know plastic basically lasts forever. You know that it's on our deepest oceans, highest mountains, and actually, most worryingly, we've found plastic in our blood. We've been brainwashed by the myth of recycling. If only we just did our bit. But the reality is vastly different. Earlier this year, Greenpeace and Everyday Plastic did a survey which revealed only 12% of the plastic we have in the UK is recycled. 12%. The vast majority actually ends up in landfill or is incinerated. Learning some of these things as I did my research really was life-changing for me. In 2018, I returned to the UK and decided that I wanted to do something in circular economy, looking at ways in which we could innovate to eliminate waste. And I could see opportunity. There's been sustainable brands in skincare and deodorant emerging over the last few years. But hair care has actually been incredibly slow to be disrupted. And there's some good reasons for that, which I'll come on to. So, the biggest organisation in the hair care industry in the UK is Procter & Gamble. The industry size is 800 million. And their leading product, you'd probably recognise it, is Head & Shoulders. So Head & Shoulders was actually launched in 1961, even before I was born. Back then, plastic and synthetics absolutely were all the rage. And I'm sure you'd probably agree that science and technology has moved on considerably. So why are we still trapped in the 1960s when it comes to shampoo? And it's not just the plastic bottle. Shampoo is actually 80% water, and many brands include plastic in the ingredients of the shampoo, a fact that shocks most people. Silicons are inside the bottle of shampoo, they accumulate on your hair, and they accumulate in the environment. So ask yourself, does shampoo actually need to be liquid in a plastic bottle? It absolutely does not. So I set about looking at how we could create a product that was high-performing, plastic-free, and absolutely zero compromise. Solid shampoo and conditioner. For 12 months, I worked with a cosmetic scientist because one of the biggest hurdles we have to overcome with eco-friendly products is that people believe they kind of just don't work. That's not true. I did not cook this up in my kitchen. Working with a cosmetic scientist means that we were incredibly focused on performance. And in 2019, after 12 months of R&D, Kind 2 was launched. Each one of these single bars is equivalent to 2 plastic bottles of shampoo. It's made with premium plant-based ingredients that are amazing for your hair and your scalp, including macadamia oil and hemp seed oil, which have fatty acids, and chia seed extract, which has zinc and protein. I clicked my clicker too fast, sorry about that. So, the industry has changed. The big brands are getting on the wagon of shampoo bars. However, for us, it's not just what's inside the bar, the premium plant-based ingredients. It's what we have chosen not to use. And the ingredients listed here are commonly found in both liquid shampoo and some of our competitor products. And we are determined that something like silicons is we would not want to embrace. We've won multiple industry awards since we launched in 2019. And we've also won the hearts and minds of our customers. We have over 500 five-star customer reviews. Our customers say their hair feels soft, shiny, manageable, and as well as that, they're pleased to ditch the plastic. So, I am incredibly pleased to have saved 35,000 plastic bottles so far from this planet. But I'm not done yet. I honestly believe that sustainable hair care can be in a solid form and it can go mainstream. I really want to work with other people who believe in that dream and who can help me from a branding, messaging and introduction perspective. I truly believe we can have hair care that is kind to your hair and kind to the planet. Thank you.
So for those of you that have not been following me on LinkedIn, you're probably wondering why I'm wearing this. Earlier this week, I posted that if enough people actually liked the little post that I put with me wearing this, I said I would wear it tonight. So we got to that number, and I also brought some celebrations for all of you, but I'm gonna make you guys do a little bit of work here. So I'm gonna have each section do a Mexican wave, and the winner's gonna get some candy. So here we go, ready? You guys, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's better. We got some people standing. All right. So here we go. I'm just going to go like. Oops. That was horrible. Not too good at tossing celebrations. Okay. So our last speaker this evening was meant to be Joel Greats of New Ground Coffee. But about 8 hours ago, he called me up and said he has tonsillitis, so he couldn't make it. But he did send in his slides and asked me if I would speak a little bit about New Ground Coffee. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about New Ground Coffee and walk through these things that these pages that Joel sent over. So New Ground Coffee was on our first cohort. So this was in the summer of 2018. And 2 co-founders, so Dickon Morris and Joel Greats, and they had no past experience in coffee, but they were absolute coffee geeks. That's what they loved. They were passionate about it. And what they'd started doing was basically buying in green coffee beans, sending it to a roastery, and then selling it off to their family and friends and making a little bit of money on the side. So that's kind of their business. Hold on, not yet. That's kind of their business. I got to find the clicker I dropped somewhere. That's kind of their business, but what they also have is a social mission. Their social mission is to train and employ ex-offenders. And why is that? Because Joel actually grew up in one of the roughest parts of Liverpool. And at the age of 10, his father was transferred, and he moved away. But he still stayed in touch with some of his friends, and he noticed how a number of his friends ended up in the prison system. And not only did they end up in the prison system, but he saw how basically that was like a life sentence because you would never get employed, you could never get away from it, and he felt that that was horrible and he wanted to do something about it. So Joel and Dickon came on our first accelerator, and they went through the program and got to the end of 2018 and raised a little bit of money, and this is the cupboard. So this is what they did with the little bit of money they raised, and it really is a cupboard. You can see a picture of Joel there on the left. And that is just about a panorama because it's not much bigger than that. And effectively what they were doing is they were buying in their green coffee and they were packaging it and selling it out. And gradually from going and just pounding the pavement over the course of a year, they managed to grow their business steadily. And in fact, their business did grow quite steadily. So what you can see on this graph, the first 4 bars to the left are when they were in the cupboard. So effectively just wholesale and a little bit of online retail. But they did raise some additional money in the beginning of 2019, and from that, they then bought their own roastery, leased a space, got the roasting equipment, and then also had a brew bar as part of that. And as you can see, business starts to increase, but of course, as would happen, within 2 quarters of opening the roastery and the brew bar, COVID hits. And what you can see, the blue at the bottom, it just basically goes to practically nothing. So all the independent cafes, their customers close. They're losing all their business, and they decide, well, we're going to spend more time on online. And amazingly, they do fantastically well in online, such that by the 4th quarter of 2020, their online business is actually bigger than what their wholesale business was prior to the pandemic. And of course, then things loosened up again. The business has really started to take off, and as you can see, it hasn't slowed down since. 17 straight quarters of growth from a low of about, I think there was about 6,000 pounds a quarter. They're now going to do more than 200,000 pounds this quarter. If we go to the next slide. So this is a kind of important part. This is their roastery. And what you see there is a Loring roaster. And the Loring is the Tesla of roasters. At the time that they got this machine in 2019, there were less than 20 Loring roasters in the UK. And Newground is all about quality and customers. And in fact, if you looked back on the first slide, on the bottom of the slide, you could have seen that earlier this year, they were nominated for UK Roaster of the Year. So ultra high quality product. But what's really special about Newground is their social mission. And on this slide, you can see 4 of the ex-offenders that they've trained and employed. You can see from left to right, it's Prince, James, Sam, and Teslam. And working with ex-offenders is really challenging because many of these guys have actually never had a job before. So they have to really teach them, what they need to be doing, how they need to act towards their coworkers, and just really changing their lives. And the way that I think Joel would put it, he would say, having a job dramatically reduces their stress and allows them to integrate both with their families again, but also with society as a whole. And that's, just a phenomenal difference. Just to give you an idea, for ex-offenders, recidivism, so reoffending, goes down by 70% if they're able to get a job. But it is very hard to get a job if you're an ex-offender because you have to tick that box and then no one will even take you to the interview stage. So, next slide, please. What's next for Newground? This is actually, for those of you familiar with Oxford, this is on Ship Street, which is right in the absolute center of Oxford. They've just taken a lease on this site, and so that will be opening in March, and they know that they'll get a ton of footfall, both for the retail business, but it'll also increase their wholesale and also their online presence. Sometimes people ask, well, how does it turn out when you invest in an impact startup? Well, the original investors, there were 6 original investors in Newground. On the last valuation that Newground raised to get the money to get the lease and open up this cafe, those investors have now made 27 times their money. So not 27%, but 27 times their money. So phenomenal investment with Newground. And that's the last slide. So Joel was very sad that he couldn't make it tonight, but he did want to also give all of you a gift. So what he has provided and what we have downstairs are called Newgroundies, which are basically like Negronis. So they're fantastic. I hope everybody tries one. They're really tasty. And I know that now I'm the only thing standing between you and some Negronis and canapes. So I will make this brief, but closing this evening, I want to first of all thank our special guests, to James and Keren. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Can we get a big round of applause? Also to the great production team, all the work you've done, and especially also to Steph Lau, who is with us at Impact Central, all the hard work that's gone into the producing tonight. And if we can get a final round of applause for our founders from Cohort 10. We're really looking forward to the second half of the program. And so I'll end it on one note. If you remember in the beginning of the evening, we talked about what is something that you might do in terms of change if you had to do all over again. Well, it's never too late to start. So I hope you have a great evening. Good night, and God bless you all.